A study published last October in the Proceedings for the Royal Society produced some very interesting findings about the nature of people's sense of entitlement and justice. In particular, the study suggested that our sense of what constitutes a just distribution of goods is highly dependent on what benefits us. So in the study, research participants were paired up and given the task of copying a set of 4 paragraphs down onto another piece of paper. Now, each participant did not do an equal share of the work, however. One of them was assigned the role of we'll call him the heavy lifter, and he copied 3 of the paragraphs, then another one, who we'll call the slacker, copied 1 of them. At the end of this task, the heavy lifter got to decide how to distribute a monetary reward they were given. They got some money for doing this between themselves and the slacker. So they could choose to divide it up 50-50 or 75-25, the 75 going to the heavy lifter. So what they found, perhaps unsurprisingly, was that the heavy lifter usually distributed the resources such that they got 75% of the money and the slacker got 25%. Now they also asked the participants what they thought was the most fair and moral distribution of the resources. The heavy lifters tended to say that the 75-25 split was the most just, presumably because they worked more than anyone else. Now the slackers, on the other hand, tended to say that the 50-50 split was the most just, presumably because they had no choice over whether or not they became a slacker. It was just bad luck, and so it's not fair to punish them for it. Now you might think that the heavy lifter preferred the distribution of resources that favored them just because it was in their self-interest. But in experiments in which both participants did an equal amount of work, the heavy lifter tended to choose to distribute the resources equally. This suggests that the heavy lifter in the first scenario was giving themselves more money, not only because it was in their self-interest, but also because when it was in their self-interest, they genuinely believed in some moral principle concerning merit and getting paid more when you work more. The results of these experiments conform well with what we see in the real world. People who make more money tend to think that the unequal distribution of goods that is present in our society is fairer than people who make less money. Now, this study suggests that regardless of what is factually true, the genuine moral feelings of people are partly contingent on what is in their own self-interest. And it's also worth noting that this is what we should expect, given that the human mind, and therefore our moral intuitions, are a product of evolution. Natural selection would have been very tough on moral intuitions that worked against our gene's self-interest.